On a Monday in late November 2014, employees at Sony Pictures Entertainment arrived to a workday that did not feel normal. Computers displayed a stark message. Many systems became unusable, and routine tasks, email, file access, scheduling, post-production workflows started to fail at the same time. In large companies, isolated outages happen. What made this different was the pattern. Many machines failed together, and the disruption looked intentional rather than accidental. Sony soon confirmed it was dealing with a serious cybersecurity incident that involved both data theft and widespread system damage. In the first hours of a major corporate cyber event, the pressure is not only technical. Leadership must make quick decisions with incomplete information, which systems to shut down, how to keep critical operations running, what to tell employees, and how to prevent confusion from spreading faster than facts. A destructive incident can create a special kind of urgency because it threatens the organization's ability to function, not just its confidentiality. The FBI later described the incident as one that destroyed systems and stole a large volume of business and personal data, two harms that required different response playbooks at the same time. Sony's teams had to shift instantly from normal business rhythms to emergency coordination, isolating affected networks, preserving evidence for investigators, and trying to stand up safer ways to communicate internally. When an organization's email and file servers are unstable, even the act of organizing a response becomes harder. People cannot easily confirm what is real, where instructions are posted, or which messages can be trusted. This is why many crisis plans emphasize an out-of-band communication channel, something separate from corporate systems, so that leaders can coordinate even when internal tools are compromised. A key educational point in this Sony case is that destructive malware doesn't typically appear out of nowhere in a single second. Organizations often find after the fact that intruders spent time inside the environment first, mapping systems, finding valuable repositories, and preparing tools that can disable computers broadly. That preparation stage is often invisible to everyday users. Then, when the destructive phase begins, it feels sudden and dramatic because everyone experiences the impact at the same time. At a cultural level, the Sony incident became famous because it blended business disruption with public exposure of private corporate material. But the cybersecurity lesson starts earlier. It shows how fragile modern operations can be when identity systems, file servers, and endpoint fleets are tightly interconnected without strong containment boundaries. When a company's everyday productivity depends on constant access to shared systems, attackers only need a short window of control to cause wide operational paralysis. Part 1 of this documentary story ends with a simple but powerful realization. The first day of a major breach is not only about finding the intruder, it is about keeping the organization coherent, maintaining safe communication, protecting employees from confusion, and creating enough stability to investigate. When systems go dark, clarity becomes a form of security. The most important cybersecurity lesson from the Sony Pictures hack is not the dramatic moment when computers stopped working. It is the quieter phase that often comes before, the period when intruders blend into the background of normal corporate life. Most large corporate networks are not a single machine. They are thousands of endpoints, servers, cloud services, and administrative tools connected by permissions that are designed to keep work moving. That complexity creates opportunity. If an attacker obtains legitimate credentials through password reuse, deception, or exposure from an earlier incident, the attacker can look like an ordinary user at first. This is one reason modern defenders focus so heavily on identity protection, multi-factor authentication, and monitoring unusual sign-in behavior. Public technical guidance from U.S. government cybersecurity agencies released in the same time period described patterns used in destructive campaigns, actors moving laterally across networks, using common file sharing protocols, deploying tools to overwrite data, and attempting to remove traces of their activity. While those advisories are not how-to instructions, they do show the broad shape of what defenders watch for: rapid spread, privilege use, and destructive actions coordinated across many systems. Sony's incident is often discussed as a combined operation: theft of sensitive files followed by a destructive phase that impaired systems. That combination is especially difficult for defenders because it requires responding to two timelines at once. Data theft is often discovered after some delay, when unusual outbound traffic or leaked materials become visible. Destruction, however, forces instant containment and recovery. When both occur together, organizations must preserve forensic evidence while also rebuilding core IT services, two goals that can sometimes compete. From an educational standpoint, the Sony case highlights a corporate reality problem. Security teams may have tools that generate warnings, but warnings only matter when they lead to fast decisions. Many large environments produce a constant stream of alerts. If a company's security operations are under-resourced, misconfigured, or overwhelmed, it becomes easier for intruders to stay present for long periods. That's why mature security programs try to prioritize the few signals that indicate real danger: unusual administrative activity, sudden privilege changes, unexpected remote access paths, or large data movements at odd times. Another lesson is segmentation, treating the network as zones rather than as one big open workspace. If a single employee account can reach a wide range of systems, then an attacker who takes that account can travel far. If an attacker reaches a domain administrator role, the impact can become systemic. Segmentation least privilege, and tight administrative controls do not make a company perfectly safe, but they reduce the chance that one compromised identity becomes a company-wide crisis. Part 2 ends with a sober point. The earliest stage of most major breaches looks ordinary. That is what makes it dangerous. The Sony hack teaches that defenders must assume intrusions can begin quietly and build systems that make quiet intrusions hard to maintain. As the Sony Pictures investigation unfolded, it became clear that the incident was not only about disabled computers. A large volume of internal data was taken, and later some of it appeared publicly. The FBI's public update described large quantities of personal and commercial data being stolen. This phrasing matters. It signals that the harm was both human and business related, affecting employees' privacy and the company's operations, negotiations, and internal planning. From a cybersecurity perspective, large corporate data sets are rarely stored in a single place. They live across email servers, shared drives, finance systems, HR platforms, production tools, and collaboration portals. A well-positioned intruder can search for high-signal items, contracts, legal documents, payroll information, strategy decks, and internal correspondence, because those files deliver leverage and insight. The exposure of corporate communications can also create a secondary risk: misinterpretation. Internal messages are written for insiders, not for public reading, and once they are exposed, they can be taken out of context and amplified. In educational terms, one of the most useful lessons here is about data minimization and access control. Companies often keep more sensitive material accessible to more people than strictly necessary because it feels efficient. Over time, this creates permission sprawl, where many accounts can access many folders. In normal times, it speeds up work. In an intrusion, it speeds up loss. Strong organizations regularly audit who can access what, remove stale permissions, and separate truly sensitive repositories behind additional controls. Another lesson is encryption and key management. Encrypting sensitive archives is not a silver bullet. Attackers can sometimes capture keys or access decrypted data through authorized systems, but encryption can reduce harm when data is copied in bulk from storage. It can also force attackers into noisier behaviors that are easier to detect. Sony's incident also illustrates why employee support must be part of incident response. When personal data is involved, employees need clear guidance, trustworthy channels, and practical protections. A calm, non-alarming approach is essential. People should understand what categories of information might be affected, what steps the company is offering, and how to avoid misleading messages that imitate official support. Finally, the Sony case highlights a difficult ethical question for the digital age. How should the public handle leaked corporate material? Even when curiosity is high, broad distribution of stolen data can deepen harm to individuals who did not choose visibility. Many professional newsrooms and institutions have since developed more cautious practices around publishing details from hacked materials, trying to balance public interest with privacy and safety. Part 3 closes with a clear educational conclusion. In modern corporate breaches, the exposure of internal data is not an abstract IT problem. It is an organizational problem, touching privacy, trust, legal responsibility, and the long-term health of a company's culture. One of the most widely discussed elements of the Sony Pictures hack was attribution, who was responsible, and how investigators reached their conclusions. In December 2014, the FBI publicly stated that it had concluded the North Korean government was responsible for the cyberattack on Sony Pictures Entertainment, describing technical indicators such as similarities in malware and other investigative findings. For a cybersecurity documentary, the key educational point is not the politics. It is the process of attribution itself and why it is difficult. Cyber investigations work with imperfect evidence. Malware can be reused, infrastructure can be shared, identities can be imitated, and messages can be staged to mislead. That is why credible attribution usually relies on multiple strands of evidence rather than a single clue. Government agencies sometimes combine technical forensic evidence with intelligence sources that are not fully shareable with the public, which can create a gap. The public sees a conclusion, but not every supporting detail. This gap matters because organizations watching the case, other studios, large enterprises, and security teams need actionable lessons without turning every incident into a geopolitical debate. The practical lessons remain consistent regardless of the attacker's identity. Protect credentials, segment networks, monitor lateral movement, harden endpoints, and maintain resilient backups. The Sony incident also shows how attackers sometimes adopt labels or public personas. A group calling itself the Guardians of Peace claimed responsibility and issued intimidating messages. In educational terms, this is important because it separates two concepts, a public claim and a verified identity. Claims can be part of psychological pressure, distraction, or misdirection. Defenders should treat claims carefully and prioritize facts gathered through forensics. From a corporate response standpoint, attribution can influence how a company communicates and coordinates. It may change which government partners become involved, what regulatory expectations arise, and how risk is framed to employees and stakeholders. But it should not delay core response actions, containment, recovery, evidence preservation, and transparent communication about what data categories were affected. Part 4 ends with a calm takeaway. Attribution is often contested in public conversation, but corporate defense does not require perfect certainty about who. It requires robust controls that reduce impact no matter who is on the other side, and mature incident response that can operate under uncertainty. After a destructive corporate cyber incident, the word recovery can sound simple, but it is not. Recovery is not just reinstalling computers. It is rebuilding trust in the environment, trust that systems are clean, identities are secure, and restored servers will not be compromised again immediately. Government cybersecurity guidance around destructive malware emphasizes practical defensive priorities. Ensure offline backups, validate restoration procedures, restrict administrative privileges, monitor for unusual internal traffic, and treat rapid lateral movement as an emergency signal. The reason offline backups matter is straightforward. If backups are reachable from the same network, they can be damaged during a destructive event. Offline or strongly isolated backups turn a catastrophe into a disruption. The Sony case illustrates a deeper resilience idea. Business continuity is inseparable from cybersecurity. If core services like identity, email, and file sharing are unavailable, the organization needs alternative workflows. That includes fallback communication channels, manual approvals for certain processes, and clear internal instructions to prevent rumors from becoming the main information system. Another educational lesson is that recovery is also a governance moment. Leaders must decide what to restore first and what to rebuild differently. In many organizations, the fastest path is to restore as was. The safer path is to restore with improvements, tighter admin access, improved logging, stronger endpoint protections, and better segmentation. That safer path can be slower, but it reduces the chance of a repeat event. Sony's incident also highlights the emotional dimension of recovery. Employees may feel uncertainty about personal privacy, skepticism about internal communications, and fatigue from disrupted work. A mature response includes employee support, clear timelines, and calm guidance. The goal is stability, not drama. Finally, resilience involves learning. A high quality post incident review does not focus on blame, it focuses on control gaps and decision bottlenecks. Which alerts were missed? Which permissions were too broad? Which systems lacked logs? Which vendors or contractors had access that was not well governed? Which communication steps were confusing? These questions are uncomfortable, but they produce the most valuable improvements. Part 5 closes with the core message. The true measure of cybersecurity is not whether you can prevent every intrusion, it is whether you can limit damage, restore operations safely, and emerge with a stronger, more disciplined environment than before. The Sony Pictures hack remains a landmark corporate cyber case because it compressed many modern risks into one event: operational shutdown, data theft, public leakage, crisis communication, and long-term reputational impact. From a cybersecurity education perspective, it delivers several enduring lessons that are still relevant for companies today. First, identity is the perimeter. In many breaches, attackers succeed not by breaking a single wall, but by using credentials and permissions that let them move through normal pathways. That makes multi-factor authentication, strong password hygiene, and privileged access controls foundational rather than optional. Second, assume intruders can be inside quietly. The most dangerous period of many incidents is the time before discovery. That is why logging, detection engineering, and security operations maturity matter. If an organization cannot see lateral movement and privilege escalation, it cannot contain early. Third, segmentation reduces the blast radius. Treating the enterprise as zones: production, HR, finance, creative assets, email, admin, limits how far any one compromised account can reach. Segmentation is not only a network design, it is an access design. Fourth, destructive events demand offline resilience. Backups must be isolated, restoration should be rehearsed, and crisis communication channels should not depend on the same systems that might fail. Guidance on handling destructive malware repeatedly highlights these resilience practices for a reason. Fifth, public claims are not the same as verified truth. In Sony's case, a public persona claimed responsibility while investigators worked attribution in parallel. The lesson is to respond to realities, damage, exposure, recovery needs, without being pulled off course by noise. Finally, cybersecurity is an executive responsibility. The Sony incident showed how quickly a cyber event becomes a business event. Decisions about budgets, vendor controls, monitoring, and incident response readiness are leadership decisions. When leadership treats security as operational discipline, like finance controls or safety protocols, the organization is better prepared, calmer under pressure, and more capable of protecting both people and creative work. That is why this case still matters. It teaches that modern organizations need security not as fear, but as structure: clear boundaries, strong identity controls, practiced recovery, and communication that keeps people informed without spreading anxiety.